Hi guys, and welcome to another Red Gaming Tech video with myself and Marta. This is going to be the last video from me for a few days, as I am going to be heading off to a festival tomorrow, Bloodstock Festival up in Derby. So if any of you do see me there, I doubt it, but if you do feel free to say hello. I don't bite, I promise. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about technology, as we have a bunch of news to get through today, and I'm going to kick things off with AMD. Now, over the last couple of days, Paul has been talking a lot about Threadripper 2, but it seems we haven't heard the last about Threadripper 1, as AMD are understandably trying to get rid of a little bit of stock when it comes to the old generation of Threadripper. And as part of their efforts to do this, they have reduced the price of Threadripper 1 to a pretty crazy $249. Now, of course, it does come with a bit more information, understandably, and that is, well, it is the 12-core 1920X that has been cut down to this rather cheap price of, again, $249. Now, obviously, this is a clearance deal. Now, who knows how long this is going to last, because it probably is just like literally get rid of the last of the stock before we release Threadripper 2, or at least as much of it as we can. It is going to be releasing before too long. So this is a crazily cheap deal. $249 for the 12-core Threadripper is pretty much insanity. If you had said that, you know, mere months ago, you'd have been like, ha! I mean, are you okay, or no? But in all seriousness, if you guys were thinking about perhaps picking up a Threadripper beforehand, but it's perhaps a touch too expensive, and obviously Threadripper 2, as great as it is in terms of specifications, is rather hefty on the old wallet, this might actually be a great opportunity for you to get your hands on the Threadripper for a very cheap price. Obviously, first generation Threadripper, but still. Now, that is not the only piece of AMD news that I actually have for you today, as Lenovo actually have something rather juicy when it comes to Ryzen rather than Threadripper. So what do we have? Well, we have the specifications of the Ryzen 3 and Ryzen 5 2nd generation. So of course that will be the 2300X and the 2500X as well. Now, of course, we did see the first details of both of these chips published quite a few months ago now. It seems weird to call May a few months ago. It feels like only yesterday, to be honest. But obviously it is. It's August. But anyway, even though we did get some details back then, we do have more information from Lenovo to kind of fill in the gap. So what do they actually have for us today with this accidental publication of these specifications? So with the Ryzen 5 2500X, we have 4 cores, 8 threads with a base frequency of 3.6 GHz and then a turbo CPU frequency of 4 GHz at a fairly light TDP of 65 watts. We have an L2 cache of 512 kilobytes per core and an L3 cache of 16 megabytes as well. And DRAM support does go up to DDR4 2933 MHz as well. But what about the Ryzen 3 1300X, I hear you ask? Well, we see 4 cores, 4 threads for this particular one, 3.5 GHz for the base, and then 4 GHz for the turbo, and once again the TDP is the same. Of course, we do see a lower L3 cache for this one with 8 megabytes of L3, and then the same DDR support as well for the 2300X. Now, due to this information actually being published a little bit early by Lenovo, they're obviously preparing to have these chips in some of their machines, so it wouldn't be all that outside the realms of possibility to actually see these chips being out to the mass market before too long. So we're going to move away from Camp AMD to their arch rivals Intel. Now, of course, Intel have pretty much had the run of the place for quite some time now, especially in the server market, but as we have discussed numerous times now, it looks like those days are coming to an end, and we actually have a rather interesting report about how Intel are trying to fight back against AMD. Now, we have an interesting report from Reuters, who apparently spoke to the data center chief over at Intel, who basically said that they're planning on upgrading their existing chips to basically try and fight back against AMD, as I've said already. Now, we've discussed before how analysts are expecting AMD to start eating into Intel's market share in the very, very competitive and of course very important server market multiple times now. Now, obviously, AMD are launching, or planning to launch, should I say, 7nm, whereas Intel are definitely behind the curve in that regard, at least in terms of pure NM. As of course, Intel's still on 14nm, and we're not expected to see 10nm start to actually really percolate out into the market until 2020. That being the server chips, of course, with retail chips coming, or at least expected to be coming, in 2019. So you can kind of see why analysts are expecting AMD to kind of start eating into that Intel server pie as they kind of win the NM race, as it were. Now, the impact of this cannot be overstated, in my opinion, because, you know, while you or I might not be interested in the server market as just regular consumers, it is obviously very important to Intel, especially as they have very much had the run of the place. Obviously, AMD are very eager to get as much of that pie as possible. But when it comes to Intel specifically, due to the fact that the PC market, you know, it's been doing fairly well for itself, it hasn't been like growing in leaps and bounds exactly. So obviously they have been kind of relying on the server markets to kind of, you know, bump their numbers up, as it were. So understandably, they don't want to be losing any of this market share. I mean, they wouldn't want to anyway, even if this wasn't a fact, but this kind of compounds that, if you ask me. Now, I actually have some rather interesting comments from the Bernstein analyst Stacey Razgon, hopefully I pronounced her name correctly, who said that Intel has, quote, completely lost control of the narrative, and who also says, quote, they've made their bed, now they have to lie in it, and is also saying that they have a rating of market underperform for Intel's stock. Now, we are expected to see Navin Shenoy, the data center chief over at Intel, lay out their plans to Wall Street quite soon. So what do Intel actually have in mind? Well, their plans kind of rest on their ability to, quote, stitch together their CPUs, memory chips, obviously semi-customizable chips, software, and processing brains. Intel are planning to pair a new chip technology called Optane with its processors next year, basically hoping to give their current lineup a bit of shot in the arm, a bit of a boost, while they basically try and play catch-up against AMD, as they are, as I've already said, expected to not release 10nm for quite some time. And Shenoy, again, who's the data chief over at Intel, data center chief, should I say, said, quote, we're excited, we're hungry, we're ready to compete, and we're ready to get after it. Now, this is why I always say that, you know, competition breeds innovation. You know, Intel are afraid about the fact that AMD are expected, and again, this is expected by analysts, this isn't like a sure thing, to start eating into the very profitable market share for the server market itself. So due to this, they're like, oh, quick, you know, we've got our plans of 10nm and that's great, but Intel are kind of, AMD, sorry, should I say, are ahead of us in that regard. How can we kind of try and stave them off until then? And also the plan is, okay, how can we improve our current chips, you know, without basically having to reinvent the wheel? And this is what they've come up with. They're tweaking and improving their current lineup. You know, maybe there'll be price reductions, maybe there won't, that sort of stuff. But this has kind of made Intel wake up and go, oh, okay, hang on, we kind of need to start playing hardball now, rather than just being like, it's fine. We've got this, it's fine. In all seriousness, I'm being slightly facetious, but you get my point. They are now being given a shot in the arm to compete, to improve their current lineup, just because AMD, should I say, are nipping at their heels. So it's going to be very interesting to see what actually happens, because again, despite Intel's comments, AMD are still expected to start taking more and more share away from them. But obviously, whether or not that actually happens, or how much it happens, or how much of an effect it actually has, remains to be seen. That's not the only Intel piece I have for you. Yes, we have double pieces of news for both companies today, as we have yet another company joining the foray when it comes to supporting the 9th generation of Intel CPUs. Now, this time around, we actually have ASUS announcing that they're going to be releasing motherboard updates that to add the 9th generation core Whiskey Lake processor compatibility for pretty much their entire 300 series chipset family. So just to kind of give you a brief overview, this includes H310, B360, H370, and of course the Z370 as well. Now on screen there would have been showing a table, and there'll be a link to it in the description as well, which shows the minimum BIOS version that you will need if you're perhaps eyeing up Whiskey Lake. So we have seen numerous motherboard manufacturers come out of the woodwork and say, hey guys, we're supporting it as well. So obviously this is not just a one company thing, you know, we've had one after the other after the other. So I'd fully expect this to continue, but it's nice to see ASUS saying, yep, it's not just going to be our top end, it's going to be the lower end motherboards as well. So for those of you who do have those lower end motherboards, or perhaps thinking about a 9th gen upgrade, at least all you have to worry about is a BIOS revision, rather than having to cough up for a whole new motherboard, which, as I have said before, Intel have been criticised for in the past. And well, rightfully so, to be fair. So we're going to move over to our final topic for today, and unfortunately it is bad news, my friend. I know it feels like we're finally getting some good news in PC gaming, like yay! Graphics cards no longer cost a human kidney, wonderful. But unfortunately, prices are expected to increase thanks to the trade war between the US and China. So what's actually going on here, I hear you ask? Well, as I said, this is to do with the US-China trade war, and it's going to jack up in prices of PC hardware and other electronics made in China. So even if you have an American company, if they manufacture anything in China, it is going to be affected by this. A bunch of goods and services have a 25% import tariff on, quote, electronic integrated circuits, processors and controllers, electronic integrated circuits memories, electronic integrated circuits amplifiers, and electronic integrated circuits other, which, in case you weren't paying attention, is pretty much everything ever when it comes to PC hardware. And unfortunately the effects of this are going to be, well, pretty much now, as it is going to be starting on August 23rd, 2018. So what are we actually looking at in terms of real world impact for you, the consumer? I know that is the most pertinent question on your mind right now. And just to give an example, say an item is $100 when it arrives at a US port, it could be $125 before you even have any usual stuff like federal and state taxes, the supply chain, and obviously retailer markups and all that sort of stuff. So we're seeing a base cost at the sort of purest level of it's at the dock, this hasn't hit store shelves, it hasn't had a markup put on it or anything like that, and yet it's still going to be $25 more expensive. And then obviously you're going to have all the extra stuff on top, so the cost for the consumer is going to be fairly significant, unfortunately. Now obviously this isn't literally every piece of PC hardware. I was being slightly facetious there because obviously not everything is manufactured in China. Obviously a fairly large proportion of it is, but we have numerous goods, of course, being manufactured and imported from Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, and so on. But China is America's biggest source of electronic imports, so unfortunately this is going to have a rather large impact on us, and it's going to begin sooner rather than later, I'm afraid. Now there is going to be a link to a CNN article in the description below this video for the full rundown of what's actually going on here. I suggest you give them a read. I've given you what I would call the most important parts, the cliff notes as it were, but if you want to know more, go check out their article. As you would expect, they have a rather nice write-up on the whole situation and explains it more fully. Obviously it's not a politics related channel, so I don't want to go into the intricacies of why this is happening or anything like that, but unfortunately this is going to have an impact on us for anything that is imported from China. So not the end of the world, but it is going to be a bit of an ouch on the old wallet, which seems to be the status quo at the moment for PC gamers. Like, we've finally got some relief, and now it's like, damn, never mind. Anyway, that is me done for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.